Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Angela Yee, and I am joined here by a panel of our experts here to present on the importance and effects of standards in and I'm joined here by Lee Gertjan, Kevin O'Neill, and I'm going to do some more formal introductions in a couple slides here. So here I'm going to just put up our safe harbor agreement. So if you've joined us for some of our other webinars, you may have seen this previously. Due to the nature of our presentation today, we might be reviewing some roadmap items, and we just want to ensure that you're not making any purchasing decisions off of what's being discussed today. We're not going to be focusing fully on roadmap items, but we'll just be flashing a few things on as we get started here. And here we're rolling into, at Autodesk, we've had this vision that is based on the notion of digitization, integration, and optimization. And while they might sound like simple buzzwords, they're truly our North Star in construction that has driven outside investments as well as internal prioritization of features and development activities. So here, just a reminder about Autodesk Construction Cloud. Holistically, what the Autodesk Construction Cloud represents is the unification of best-in-class functionality within the Autodesk construction portfolio, and pushing to data across all phases of construction. And here's an image of that direction that we set. So really looking at connecting across design and through construction and the operations phases. As we're talking about Autodesk Construction Cloud, it's really kind of integrating across all of the project lifecycle phases that you're seeing represented here. And while there are a lot of elements that are in the mix, when we have today's discussion, a lot of that is going to be focused on the underpinning service, so that that Docs service layer that you see here highlighted, that common data environment in document management that touches across the entire life cycle and the entire Autodesk Construction Cloud. And we're specifically going to be focused on areas that support ISO 19650 as a global standard to enable our project teams. So with that, we're just going to take a quick look here. I'm not going to go through in detail all of these features. It's something that I'm happy to answer questions about as we jump into our Q&A closer to the end. But just wanted to share with you all that in both Autodesk Construction Cloud and BIM 360 Docs, we've introduced quite a few features that support the ISO 19650 global standard and Docs as a common data environment. Here on the right, you can see a screenshot of the naming standard builder in Docs. And it's something that admins on our projects have access to now, and they're able to set standards across their projects for enforcement of naming standards and other features that we're continuing to roll out. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and have the panel co-speakers introduce themselves. And because I haven't done a formal introduction of myself, I'll go ahead and do that and then hand it over to Kevin. So my name is Angela Yee. I'm a product manager here at Autodesk, and I'm working on Autodesk Docs as well as BIM 360 Docs and some of our integrations to our desktop design applications. I'm going to pass it off to Kevin O'Neill to introduce himself. Oh, you're muted, Kevin.
That was a beginner's mistake. Thanks, Angela. Yeah, my name's Kevin O'Neill. I'm working with Skanska UK as a digital implementation and support specialist. And I'm sort of seconded into an alliance called the @ONE Alliance, working in the water.
Oops, we may have lost him for a moment.
side of things on that. So yeah, thank you.
Kevin, we lost you for a moment. Would you mind repeating?
Did you get me?
So
Am I back online now?
Yes, you are.
Excellent. It's a perfect time for my VPN to kick me out and then back in again. Sorry, where did we get to?
So we heard your title, and then
Okay.
I think you were starting to speak about the project that you're on.
Okay, yeah. So working in the At One Alliance, which is part of Anglian Water, and we're implementing BIM 360 and utilizing that in many aspects through from engineering through to delivery and construction. So I'll hand over to Lee.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Lee Ramage. I am a design manager. I work for Robertson Construction in the UK. I've been in the industry for around 25 years. Part of my role, oversee information management across our construction business in the UK. And we've been using 360 as our common data environment for all our projects now for about 3 years. And I think we've got Gert next.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee. So my name is Gert-Jan Ditzel, hard to pronounce for people in America or speak English. So Angela calls me DJ, and that's fine. So work at Dura Vermeer, family-owned company, strives for building objects and generate economic and social return. Now you know the drill, like sustainability, environment. But we are just a great company to work with. I work with Dura Vermeer for 8 years right now, and yeah, I'm happy to be here and to meet you all also in this way. So thanks.
Great, thank you so much for joining. And then I'm going to go through the Q&A process. This is going to come closer to the end of the panel, but you can feel free to drop questions in as we go through our live discussion. So here's some quick guidance. So in the panel, you'll see that there is a chat function and there's also a questions function. We're asking that you please put your questions in the questions function. The about it is that you can upvote one another's questions. And so then it will allow us as speakers to take a look at those and answer some of the upvoted questions first. And so that's that can happen all the way through. You can feel free to drop your questions in earlier as we're having live discussion, and if you're having any trouble with that, just post in the chat and we can direct you to where the questions tab is. But we definitely look forward to that. We're going to save 10 to 15 minutes at the end to answer some of those questions live. And like I was mentioning, if you have questions on features specifically within Docs, you can feel free to post those as well, or questions to our panelists here who are sharing their knowledge about ISO 19650 today. So with that, I'm going to just stop sharing so that we can see one another's faces, and we'll dive into the live discussion here. So we've got a series of interesting questions here, and I'm going to start with Lee. Would you be able to tell our listeners what ISO 19650 is if they're unfamiliar?
Yeah, sure. ISO 19650 is an international standard for managing information for built assets using BIM or BIM. It replaced in the UK, I think it replaced PAS 1192 in 2019, which was a bit of an easier shift for those of us in the UK. It standardizes the way clients, designers, contractors, subcontractors, operators use data in the construction industry. It covers design, construction, operation, the full life cycle of built assets. Its original purpose was to minimise wasteful activity and improve predictability for time and cost, essentially, and I think quality also falls in that category.
Great, thank you so much, Lee. And then we're going to move into our next question with GJ. So I'm wondering if you could tell us why ISO 19650 and other data standards are important to you and your team and to the industry.
Yeah, of course, Angela, thanks. So, well, I think everybody agrees on that having no standard on your project will become chaos. But a too hard and strict standard can have the same effect, that no one knows what to do exactly. So most of the times ending up with a time-consuming task for coordinators or managers on the project to fix it. So, or everybody does their own thing. thinking that they do it right, and the way we're ending up having the same chaos. So having a national or an international standards helps a lot if the standard is broadly being used. So, and that's important, if it's broadly being used. So I think there's a challenge we all recognize, because having a standard is just step one. Implementing this in your own company is step two. So the broad scale implementation at your company itself. But that implementing this in your complete construction branch where we are in as Duravermeer, yeah, that's a complete other story. So I think that's an ongoing step that I think will never end. So my experience that has to be in a standard is it has to be practical in use. It has to be an open standard, so free of use, free of download for everybody. And then the continuity. So it has to be there with minimal or better no changes. So yeah, having a standard and using standards contributes to having also more consistent company data. So if you have no standards in place, then it doesn't make sense. And I think also what Andrew Anagnos says in the keynote, that is where the benefits are now and mainly in the future. So to have that data that makes sense, and that contributes on having more insights, making better decisions, and having better processes in place. So yeah, I think the importance is really there for having a standard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, GJ. Definitely makes a lot of sense with so many different, players potentially on a project team, having a set standard across a project as well as, across a company and region. So next, we'll move into a question that I'll be asking all three of our co-speakers here. So maybe I'll start with Kevin, since he hasn't answered any of the other questions yet. So in your experience, how can different AEC stakeholders like architects, contractors, or project owners benefit from implementing data standards?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people have different views on it. I think the standardization just ensures that we're all talking the same language. We call the same thing, call the same items the same thing. So, the apple's an apple, a widget's a widget. And no matter what the discipline is, so everyone kind of knows what we're dealing with on projects. Having codified data within the standardization, we can have better handovers, so the data can move around, seamlessly. And then it gives the chance, with meaningful data standards for the disciplines to do what they're best at. So the designers can do more design, the constructors can do more construction, and they're not concerned about the data standards because they know the data standards are there. The people are working to the same principles and same I'm trying to say, yeah, that the same standard. That's what I'm talking.
I think to contribute on that one, Kevin. So if a standard is used in project one, then yeah, most of the times it is searched by everybody and how to do it and how to work with it. But then in the second project, you're using the same standard, then it will be making sense because the party already knows how to deal with that standard. So yeah, we have exactly that. We have 430 projects on our Outline Alliance, and knowing where certain drawings are going to be and exist, you can go straight to those folders. So that standardization is crucial. Yeah, that's crucial. Yeah, but yeah, to get everybody aligned. So I think there's a big a big challenge.
yeah, absolutely.
And what about you, Lee? Do you have anything to add on this?
No, I can agree with both Gert and Kevin. I think the bigger thing for me is just consistency and even basic information quality. It's not, you see the real benefits when there's a complex project with multiple buildings or multiple facets, I think, where it will help you put the data into sets without any effort. It works exceptionally well if people think it through properly beforehand. I also feel it's a good marker for design quality, and certainly in the jobs that I look at, you'll find that smaller designers or subcontract designers who are reluctant to adopt it or struggle to understand the even the kind of basic rules you set round about the naming standard, you tend to find your information substandard as well. So I use it as a good marker for even basic quality, that if people don't buy into it and don't understand the benefits, you tend to find their information's not as coordinated with others as it should be.
Just one to add to that, just something as simple as having a common origin point between the disciplines for coordination. You'd think it would just be a no-brainer, but the amount of times that it doesn't happen. I'm not saying on my project currently, but over time, for clash detection, clash avoidance, you really want even those things just sorted right from the start.
I think we all know that that problem and have recognition about it. So
yeah, I guess this is a good segue then. So kind of expanding on this, are there any common challenges that you see tied to standards like ISO 19650, and it could be other standards also, that stakeholders should know about?
I'll start on that one if that's okay. I think Gert touched on it in the last point. The biggest problem I come across is where a naming convention is not fixed or agreed from the very outset of the job. Especially in construction in the UK, you find the contractor isn't often involved until a longer period later on, where the design's already started. As Gert pointed out, changing the naming convention at a later stage can be very problematic and very time consuming. I find the naming convention is easier used when it's enforced from the start and everybody agrees to it. I do find if the contractor, or in my position, if we've not been involved, the designers often adopt their own in-house standards and don't tend to share that with others, expect others to adopt something similar. That's been a problem for us, and I think that is a challenge that probably developers and clients should be more attuned to making sure the naming standards correct from the outset.
Yeah, and I think to just to be honest, like where we at Dura Vermeer, so what we did is we took on the ISO 9650, and then we implemented the work in progress, shared, published, and archive, and we did that on the folder structure. So like in BIM 360, but we also tied it to the SharePoint environment, and we have a platform for our partners to get onboarded. But the thing was that everybody was getting first experience about WIP, shared, published, and archive. And at first, it all makes sense. Like everybody was like, "Yeah, okay, that's a good one. We have a work in progress. We've shared, published. Yeah, it makes sense." But then they had the devils in the details. Like, okay, then the question came up from, hey, GJ, I have this document here, and I want to move it from SharePoint to Docs, but do I have it first in WIP and then in shared, and how? But it is approved internally, so can I get it to published at once, and do I need an approval workflow? So the stage that we're still in at Dura Vermeer is that employees are still struggling with those details from, hey, I have this document and how to deal with it. So yeah, I'm not quite sure if you have the same challenges, but we definitely have.
Kevin, have you got anything to add to that? Because there's a couple of points Gert made there. In looking at the common data environment and the folder structure and the process, that's the kind of biggest pressure I find on a project, where the entire team buys into the process, but at some point someone wants to accelerate past we don't have time to review it, or it don't have 6 or 7 days to review that. It has to happen now. And that's the hardest thing to manage, because they don't seem to understand that, look, yeah, you could go and build with it just now or order materials, but if that's wrong, you'll have to do it again. And at longer term, it's not. And that's an education thing for me, that a lot of times it feels like lip service from the guys that have got very different pressures from me, who have to work in a site environment, but they want it now and they need it now, but they don't seem to see that, look, if we've not had enough time to look at it, it may be wrong and you'll have to revisit it or do it again, and that'll be more frustrating. That's a message that I think that a lot of people struggle to get across in the construction industry. Like, get it right first time in design, not just on the site. And longer term, it will save you a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, I was just going to add the perception that it's too restrictive. and the different sectors have different sort of, or different disciplines have different needs and wants. But yeah, there's definitely compromise required between the various areas. Like I think Gert touched on that right at the start, that things yeah, being a wee bit too restrictive, and making sure that yeah, people can move things slightly to make it work, because it's difficult to legislate for every single scenario in one standard. But
yeah, because my employees, my colleagues also ask me from, hey, can you just ask Autodesk a one approve button? So like approve, and then then it all fires up. So yeah, okay.
One thing also I'd touch on is the resistance to adoption. People want to do their own thing that they've been doing for years and years and years, and trying to get over that can be very difficult. So I think some of the soft skills of change management are really useful in that area. So we're lucky in our business, have invested a lot of time and money in change management. So we've got a team of change managers, and we can sort of tap into that as and when. But yeah, a lot of companies probably don't have that.
Now, these are all great points. There are so many different aspects to it. Everything from the soft skills part of it, managing like the people and ensuring that people feel comfortable making those changes in process, and then also just the process management, like GJ was mentioning, and I know Lee and team have a very advanced set of training on new processes across their team, which I think has been really effective for the rollout of BIM 360 from what I've seen. So thank you for sharing all of that. We're gonna talk a little bit more about common data environment as a concept. So just wondering from your perspectives, we hear common data environment, we hear CDE a lot come up, and we're just wanting to ask why is it an important concept, like a deeper concept, and not just a buzzword in the industry?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Trying to get away from the silo mentality of everyone just sort of doing their thing, chucking it over the wall to the next one, and everyone working on the same information at the core. For us, we were lucky that we started the journey to BIM 360 as our CDE pre-COVID, so it was just sort of at the time, and we were able to use that like as a real world example when everyone was sent home, that we had that in play. So we were using that, and everyone could still function, the projects could still happen, because we had that information in a data environment that was central, and we could carry on. Accelerated things by I'm sure everyone went through that process, and it got accelerated pretty quick. But especially when we've got 400 odd projects on there, so yeah.
Yeah, you and Tom?
Yeah, I think I think from my opinion, I think you also have to believe in the concept of a CDE. So at Durfmere, we use different let's say silos, but you want to have one common data environment where your document is. And I know it's a saying like having a single source of truth, but if you have different silos, like internally you work with SharePoint, and externally, but also internally you work with BIM 360, and then you end up creating two silos and not having one CDE. So what we did at Durfmere is we thought that through. We've also always in our mind to have the single source of truth stored like basically in one or the other platform. So to give an example how we approached such a things is, well, hey, if the document is internally approved, we can move it via the integrations we have built to BIM 360, leaving a link in SharePoint, and that link is is going through the Docs environment, so to BIM 360, and then opening up that document. So I think you have to always also have to believe in the concept of having a CDE in place. So yeah, it's a belief, and I think you have to keep in mind having a single source of truth, but that also can be very difficult in practice. We found out ourselves.
I think from my perspective, and you often overlook this if you've been using common data environments for a while, and I think Docs is probably my third or fourth common data environment. You can lose the bigger picture is that things are just much faster. Everyone's looking at things in real time. It moves through the platform real time. Particularly for guys that work on the sites or work in manufacturing, that as soon as it's approved, they have it, they know it's correct, and they can work to it. I suppose the bigger benefit from a contractor's point of view is we didn't set out to use the common data environment this way, but it's the reporting, it's the real-time progress and quality reporting that you can get across the project team, so the client knows when something's finished, they know there's a problem. And that's taken away an awful lot of resource that was focused on doubling, tripling, handling information or data or even tracking information before. And I think we lose sight of that a lot because that's just became that's now the norm. And it kind of frightens me a wee bit to think how we coped under the same timeframes before we were using common data environments, and we were more traditionally passing things from one another and not really certain if it's correct or if it's incorrect, it's been coordinated. So I think that in terms of ISO 19650, the CDE for me is the most important aspect to that. The way we name the data and the way we adapt it helps the CDE become better, but it's the CDE that's the kind of focal point for me for everything. And without it, all the things built about it, whether it's the BIM modeling approach or whether it's the use of the data naming, or even moving it through the silos, is irrelevant because it would all happen in very different places.
Yeah, I totally agree. But you triggered me with your explanation, because I think it's also more like in this anno 2021, it's more transparency also to the clients and also to subcontractors. And I think having a CDE and giving that transparency, we are as a branch and complete supply chain are also moving away from not being transparent. I think we all know how we did our work 10, 20 years ago. So and I think the transparency is also more and more, and I like that concept and idea that it is. So
I think you're right. I think that a big thing that has changed over the past kind of 5 or 6 years, we've been becoming more common, is trust. I think people trust each other with their information more, whereas before everyone was very much like, you have to pay me for this, I've not been paid, I'll give you it later. Whereas now it's people are just desperate to get the stuff out there so they can all use it, and it is true collaboration. Really, it's everyone's happy putting everything on the table and trying to move it about until the pieces fit.
People expect more as well because they know that it exists somewhere. That data,
that's true.
That information. So it's
kind
of
a double-edged sword because
we want it.
It is a double-edged sword because they can see it sitting in the shared space and they're demanding it immediately when people haven't had the time to look at it effectively.
I think one other thing it does for us is because we use we have, I think I mentioned before, we have over 400 projects and drives consistency. So we use the project template set up to in BIM 360 to set up our projects, so then people can go in and just get they know where the information should be, and it gives them a good start anyway. Consistent location of folders and information. So it's single source, as Gert said.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. Definitely, with the single source of truth, that makes a lot of sense with data transparency needing to be important, especially with how quickly projects need to move these days. This probably doesn't apply to your teams as much because you all are very organized with your processes and implementation. But we've heard from the recently published Autodesk FMI report that over 1.8 trillion US dollars globally were lost due to bad data on construction projects in 2020 alone. So I guess with that, how do you all think that contractors, like main contractors, can ensure that they've got quality data to work from and that their teams have quality data to work from? Maybe any advice, for those out there that are listening,
We are all laughing and then waiting for somebody to unmute. No, yeah, I think, yeah, if I had the answer to this question, I wouldn't be sitting here in this session, I guess. So no, I'm joking, but to be totally honest, I don't have the answer to the question. So you do your best to get the benefits of all that one and working with the data, but I'm not quite sure if you can answer that question where we are heading. We have an idea. I think we have a vision and we are going somewhere, but I think it's always hard to get the facts on the table and to say, hey, we did this and this.
I think what I find interesting in that question is that it's not just contractors that have caused or have suffered through that loss should be attributed to developers and clients and designers and suppliers. It's interesting that it's targeting the contractors, probably because it's most of their profit, admittedly, but it should apply to all stakeholders in my view. But I think in terms of ensuring how we've got quality data, it's about taking the time to ensure that at the start of the project, or the start of a different phase or a new CDE, that people's responsibilities are clearly defined and communicated, and that the process you have got is followed and you don't deviate from it, even if you're under significant pressure to do that. And that's, we joked about it earlier on with people wanting things accelerated through the system. That's true, and it's true at every single level. And program's king in construction, so people want it out the door and need it. But the important part of that is to make sure that people are given adequate time to develop, coordinate, share and approve the design information, not squeeze that period in order to feed the guys after you. So in terms of improving it, is protect the program time you've got to review and approve the design and collaborate with it.
I was just going to touch on maybe a couple of things that might happen, but automation of data, if data collection, so you don't have to rely on sort of poor data if it can be automated out of a system, and good strong support from the top, that everyone does sort of comply, and people need to really take care with the data. It's not just someone behind a door doing it. They've got to take responsibility that the data is created by themselves, and it has to be correct and right, and because you're going to hand it over to someone and they have to do something with it. So yeah, and maybe periodic audits of the data could help, but difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for these responses. And I think kind of more the tactical side of it, because you and your teams are so advanced in adopting the ISO standard as well as other standards across your project teams. I'd love to know, where would you suggest that a main contractor or an architectural team or an owner team that's listening in today, where would you suggest that they start when thinking about implementing something like the ISO 19650 standards? Like, we know that from some of our webinars that it feels daunting to some project teams. So would love to hear your advice, just tactically speaking. How did you all think about it?
I think I touched on this in one of the other points. I think taking the time to map out how you manage information internally is really important. If you ignore ISO for a minute and just actually take the time to sit down and work out where the information travels to and from inside your organisation and where you get it from, is really helpful, because it helps focus people's attention on the kind of pressure points in that flowchart. I think the other issue there is, and I've only found this out through doing this myself repeatedly, is try and focus on the benefits from the outset. Don't look at the barriers. The barriers in my experience, tend to be nowhere near as daunting as you thought they were after you've passed them. It tends to be one of the reasons that people kind of shy away from that type of change, that this is difficult, we're not used to it, who's going to train us, what if I forget? If you focus on the benefits, which in this occasion is obviously real-time information and proper collaboration, all that stuff melts away into the background. But I think for me, adopting the CDE first and foremost before you start looking at adopting the standard is probably the easier way to go. We found a lot of the pushback we had on the adoption of 360 Docs was because of things like the naming standard we'd imposed or the process we'd imposed through the platform. Whereas in reality, people had been already using the system, and it was only when you started introducing the rules later they realised that it improved it. If you go too fast too soon, I think that's when people tend to get nervous, in my view. I don't know if Gert or Kevin share that view.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, I agree with all that. The another one would be to try not to fix the entire problem, or not try and fix everything all in one go. It's just, it is a big task, but to probably start small and build out. And also communication with all the stakeholders and understand what the desired outcomes are, and then working towards those, as you said, Lee, working towards that goal and identifying that early on. But yeah, don't go too big too fast.
I also agree with Lee and Kevin, and I think what we did, and that's more like the practical side, is we used an agile approach. So what we did is from every division we got the key users on board, and then we took on user stories, how we want to implement also the ISO standard, but also the technology side from BIM 360 and having use of the modules. We also did the same thing, like the ISO standard within the implementation of BIM 360 and what we then call a Durfamere working in the digital flow. But we used an agile approach, and that worked very good because everybody has his sprint review, so where you can discuss how to approach things, was also to discuss why do you think so, to grab that problem by the horns, let's say. And then I think the agile approach is also a good approach for having the discussion online, but also making the decisions within the amount of time that it stands for. And we participate every 2 weeks, and then you get the show on the road, because every 2 weeks you have to make decisions, and within the whole Durfamere, but also gaining with the supply chain. So, that's a more practical thing. So I loved the way that it worked with the agile approach.
One little thing that's slightly off 19650, but we sort of had an existing sort of Excel-based desktop sort of process in one of our areas, and sort of transforming that into a BIM 360 using checklists and field management. It was almost passive change. So people now, they're working in a, essentially a CDE. It's a cloud-based. Everyone has access. There's only one, rather than millions of spreadsheets everywhere, there's only one checklist that people can use. So without people knowing, they've moved into a different area, and they've been transformed, and it's working.
Great. Thank you for sharing your tactics on getting your teams on board. Now, let's zoom out a little bit, because I think we'd be remiss if we had some great thought leaders from our industry on the call with us and not zoom out a little bit and talk about an industry perspective. So one question that I have is whether you can each share your own predictions for the future of the AEC world. So just thinking about AEC and technology, and near-term changes in the construction industry and what you think might be coming further in the distance. Definitely would love to hear what your thoughts are. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll jump in. I've got a couple there. I think more business intelligence and AI sort of driving decisions. So, these things are, we're all being asked for dashboards and, Power BI stuff, but I think those things can then really drive things forward, because you'll see trends, you can see where things have to go. more robotics in the field, I think, operating machinery remotely. Yeah, I'll let someone else carry on because there's just loads of stuff that'll be coming over the hill, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee. No, for me, it's more booth on the ground. So like near term, I would like to see that we are more and more using the model. And the real intent of BIM is that everything you need to build outside is in that model. But in practice, we have major challenges here. So if you ask my opinion, and you asked me, so because in the near term, I hope this will change. Because I think, and if I look at our supply chain and our branch, like in construction, our standard now is still based on low trust extracts of the model, we call PDF. And what I hope for the future is that we move from the static PDFs to the interactive objects that are in our digital models. And sure, outside you still have the need of a drawing where measurements are in, and tags and room tags are, and everything. So, but to come more out of that static thing and more into the interactive thing, like using the model. So that will be, I think, an awesome future. Yeah, and then definitely agree with Kevin. Like you have to have AI, robotics in the field. But yeah, I think the foundation of that one is your digital model. So yeah, and then also digital twin would come in handy. So Lee.
Thanks, Gert. Thanks. I think short term, we work in one of the most dangerous industries in the globe, and I think with better field data and real-time information coming through the CDE, it'd be good to have an industry-wide focus on how we can improve health and safety at a project level. We've got far better tools than we had before, and in my view, the health and safety aspect almost just came as a happy coincidence or a byproduct to be able to have good field data. But we do have better tools now to try and turn that to advantage and stop people getting hurt. So short term, it'd be nice if we focused on how we can really leverage the CDE and Docs to drive improvements through health and safety with field tools and mobile technology. I think long term, I had a very similar response to Gert. It wasn't quite as granular as his. I quite like a PDF, but I think it was more about seeing a means to move away from data that's not modelled, even in contracts. And it's very similar to Gert's point that the sooner we can stop feeling the need to pass about and stamp essentially electronic bits of paper, the better. I think the bigger challenge there is probably legal and contractual teams who feel obliged to have things countersigned and signed. I think if we can find a way to make contracts and the actual working information we use at site level to be model based or taken from the cloud or any collaborative platform, I think that'd be a huge step forward. You would see further advances in your resources being better spent doing their job rather than handling information.
Yeah. I think adding to that, I think using sort of more long-term frameworks for construction, where people are in a more collaborative environment, and sort of the contract setup, sort of integrated project delivery is being talked about a lot, and that needs to happen more, I think, because it delivers more. And one thing, talking on the gamification of the industry, we're seeing more Unity being used, and also Lee was mentioning the health and safety, doing more sort of site inductions and things where people can go into the model and walk around. I mean, I know virtual reality has been run for a while, but it's to use it more and more in the field, and having that stuff will be that has been used already, but it's has to happen more in the industry.
Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I know we're going to move into Q&A in just a minute, so I'm going to keep this one really brief. But just to close out this section, I would love to hear maybe just one thing that excites you the most about being in this industry. from each of you.
The challenge. That's the shortest answer I can get.
Love it. Thank you. Kevin, what about you?
I love seeing stuff getting built. So I enjoy, seeing clever designs and delivering those. At the end of the day, you can walk away and see something that's tangible. And I like making stuff.
For me, I think they're very similar answers again. Apologies, Angela, but it's more about problem solving. I get a big kick out of working in teams where you can identify and address a problem before it manifests itself at site level or become a commercial issue. I still really enjoy that, and I think construction in general in AEC is just a big series of very complex problems that everyone's trying to address. So no, that's what I enjoy, and it still excites me.
I think to close that one off is people are more important than technology. Right. That's why we have to have AU physical again.
Here. I know. Yeah, I think this human, even this human connection here is just, it confirms why we do what we do every day, right? I think, this is awesome. So I guess speaking about connections, if the three of you are able to share how folks are able to connect with you, maybe you can drop it into the chat for everybody, like if there's a way to connect with you or if there's a way to, find you online, that would be awesome, because I'm sure that folks will have other questions for you post Q&A. So with that, I think we're gonna move over to Q&A, and I'm gonna have Jared introduce himself because he didn't get a chance to introduce himself earlier before we get started.
Thanks, Angela. I too am all for a non-virtual event back together. So appreciate that. But my name is Jared Krug. I manage the product marketers within the construction team. Appreciate everybody coming today. We've got a lot of questions. We have about 13 minutes left. We probably won't get through them all, but I'll go ahead with Angela and we'll kind of go through these as best we can. So I'll start off. The first one was upvoted from Dan Warren. So I'll just pose this generically and then whoever wants to jump on it. So do standards go beyond just naming conventions of files? Does a standard need to drill down to the specific metadata in each unique file format the team works with? Anybody have any thoughts?
For me, it certainly does go far beyond just the naming of the files. I think Gert spoke a lot earlier on about the kind of fluid folder structure in ISO and the way we adopt that to our advantage in the CDE. I think what's important is that we treat everything the same. I often see just design information being applicable to the standards we adopt. It should be all information. You often see clients in particular, or sometimes correspondence not being dealt with in the same manner as you would do the rest of the information. For me, it should all be the same and in the same place. If you have to introduce measures to make sure that there are confidential sections in your collaborative environment, then great. But everyone should just use it, and I think it should be far more about just a set of numbers or a set of rules, and you can apply it to actual physical objects as well at site level. And I think they can increase the adoption of field technology, shown that it goes far beyond. In fact, it opens more possibilities than we had before for managing physical aspects of the build.
I like that. So more into the physical realm versus just the digital. I like that. All right, so we have a couple more. So again, from Dan Warren, what are some examples of specific standards that you implemented that have a measurable impact on performance? Also, so that's part of the question one. And then the second part is also, how did you quantify that impact? So the first question, specific standards, some examples that you implemented. And then the second is, how did you quantify that? Kevin's itching to answer the question.
Just unmuting myself. Whether it's going to answer that exact question, I alluded earlier to changing a process that we had on Excel, which was for on-site, and we've decided to use field management with checklists. So we've sort of We have standardized that, not an actual sort of BS or ISO, but it's it's getting that done. But also to measure that afterwards, because we've got people checking in and doing those checklists and signing them off virtually. But then we're using Power BI to then pull data out of that and create dashboards, and we can sort of analyze if people are doing things and measuring, root cause analysis and, what's happening when and where. And then we can sort of identify problems and then try and solve those problems and put them back around the cycle of a continuous improvement loop. So hopefully that answers it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have actually just a follow-up question. So I think it's a good topic on the BI side. So how often do you analyze that data, and what's the cadence of analyzing that for impact and take back to refine processes?
It varies. We sort of have it goes through sort of on a weekly cycle on some things, but then we'll roll that up to monthly for other ones. Just otherwise it's a bit meaningless, but we've sort of on that process, it's still fairly new. So we're sort of still trying to find the sweet spot of how often we want to measure that. But at the moment, I think because we're sort of getting more checklists coming through and we're sort of building up a bit of data. But I think probably a monthly basis on that particular one would give something meaningful.
Fantastic. Okay. So about 9 minutes left to go ahead and get some more questions. Thank you all for asking these. So what are the biggest technology? This is from Chuck Fursley. Sorry, I might mispronounce your last name, but what are the biggest technology challenges when it comes to implementing the standards being discussed? I think we talked a little bit about this, maybe just more of a direct kind of a couple of maybe one or two challenges that you can all bubble up.
I think to be totally honest, like the technology side of it is that we weren't really used of approval workflows. So within BIM 60, that is doable and also good to set up. And what I see now in the company is that we are using approval workflows, and we are liking it. So everybody is that's good. And I think it also it relates to having a WIP shared and a published folder, and it also relates to our internal standard that we have dealing with those documents and improving that one per phase. So the technology and standards, I think that's that was the key at Durvermeer.
Nice. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, I think the technology is, it's come on so leaps and bounds over a number of years. And I think it's the behaviors that probably are dragging behind a wee bit now. But yeah, if we can get those up to the level of the technology, then I think, if it's used properly, I think we'll be a long way along the track.
Yeah, I think you have people that see it and then believe in it, and then they will definitely start to use it, and then take like the technology side for okay, that it's okay that it doesn't work for 100%, but it works for 90%, and that's good enough for me. And then there are also people, if it doesn't work 100%, then I'm not going to use it. So that's the difference between humans, I guess, and that's also fine. But it can be in the way of using technology for just that purpose.
Fantastic. We have one from Catherine Christensen. I really like this question. So this would be, I think I'll pose this in the lens of your perspective, right? So Catherine asks, so there are various BIM standards for whole building projects. Are there any BIM standards guidelines that you can point to for BIM objects, or what we'd like to see, or equipment models to guide manufacturers? So, her perspective, I think, is like, as a manufacturer, what would you like to see, or the guidelines you can point to for any BIM objects that would help manufacturers?
Yeah, I think that it's a hard question, because I'm now involved in where we wanted to produce from the model, and if you see what does that all bring to the table, that's huge. Like the file formats, the imports, the exports, the links that you have to have. I think the key to having such a workflow and going to the future of manufacturing from the building, is partnership and collaboration. Because what we do with that partner, and we try things, and it doesn't work, and then so you have to partner up and really collaborate to make that happen. So you have to be open as a manufacturer for having and not being afraid of, hey, my employees end up having no work. So that's not the thing. The employees get different work because they have to guide the process from hitting that 3D model to production. So a partnership and collaboration is the key, I guess.
Thank you. So this next one is more of a tactical functional question from Terry Madrill. So Terry asks, can you discuss the permissions to view documentation during the end-to-end processes? So specifically the different vendors, your trade partners viewing or not having access to all documentation.
Yeah, I think I can answer that. I can certainly give how we've dealt with that. We tend to have a very closed kind of QC check in the WIP space. So WIP space is reserved for designers can upload their information. It doesn't go beyond that. The only people that can see it are our document control team. They'll then vet it against not only the naming convention, but we've got a fixed set of rules that they have to check as a minimum. And it tends to be basic things like, does the title of the document on the file uploaded match the title that's been typed into the common data environment? And that, once it's past that, the documents move into a shared space. Now, in the shared space, everyone has access, but only specific organizations have access to be in the reviews within the workflows. So, for example, I wouldn't send a notification to the architect to review their own information. If it's from the architect, it will go to the other 3 or 4 consultants only. So the reviews that happen in the shared space are closed, and we control who's involved in those. But everyone can see in shared space if they're producing information, whether it be the contractor, the client, the designers. The only people that can't get in the shared space, we've used trade subcontractors. So if they've got no design liability at all, an example I give people a lot is brickworkers. So if they don't have to produce information, they're just reacting to information. They only get access to the published space, so they can only see things when we're satisfied that you can go and buy that, or you can go and build it, and it's fit for purpose. And that's a hangover from how we used to deal with information a long time ago. We're probably moving away from that now. I think we're more keen to have everyone in the shared space. But I think we've seen the advantages we talked earlier on about the trust model. And it's all about that, is that if it's all in the same space, people know what's coming and they can contribute to changing it or flagging up problems with it. So the real answer is we're probably a bit too reserved at the moment in my organisation about treating the published space and the shared space. We will move towards some of my colleagues call it a one bucket approach, where once it's been QC checked, it's in shared, and then every so often you decide to release it for the contract, construction, tender, whatever. So it's an eye-opener, but that's how we deal with it. I don't know if Gert's experience or Kevin's are different from mine.
No,
we use role-based. I was just going to say, sorry, we use role-based permissions for all our sort of different stakeholders. So for the various roles, and then sort of external suppliers, we've sort of got an umbrella role, and that's how they gain access to the system. But yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, same here. Same story as Lee. So yeah, open and transparency. And if you are aware, then that's no problem.
Fantastic. Angela, I'll let you close it out. I think we're getting close to time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. Just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for your engagement. Thank you for the questions. We will plan to circle back with some of you on responses to some of those questions. And then, of course, our speakers here today have shared their LinkedIn in the chat window. So that's where you can find them all online, which is perfect. Thank you everybody for your time. Thank you to our 3 experts for joining us, Lee, Kevin, and GJ. Thank you for taking time in your evening and also for all the preparation. We really, really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And to everybody joining us, thank you.